Hello and welcome to our 7th session on the Attitudes of Being, our study of the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5, 6, and 7, now the Gospel according to Matthew the disciple. And it's a thematic approach. I look at it as a thematic approach. In other words, I'm looking at the Beattitudes, which begin the sermon. In chapter 5, verses 3 through 10, we have 8 statements of being that start, in the English we say, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, etc., etc. That word blessed in Latin is beati, from which we get the term Beatitudes. And teachers that I've studied with, we start looking at these as attitudes of being, if you will. Attitudes of being, or the evolution of our consciousness into that Christ state of awareness, that awareness of God as our source, as our being, as our Father, as our source of being. We're looking at the Lord's Prayer. We started it in our last session. We're going to complete it in this session. We're taking a little bit of a break from the Beatitudes. We had the first 4 Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, or spirit poor in spiritual pride. Remember, he's talking to the Jewish people who believed they were the chosen people, and they had to be knocked down a notch and say, well, you're not any, that you're not, you're just one part of God's kingdom, one tribe within all the many tribes of God's people, the chosen people, the children of God. And that, so being poor in spiritual pride. And that brings us into a consciousness of heaven when we know that we're equal with each other. Now, that would be great if we could do that. And if Christians would adopt that, but they don't seem to get that for some reason. Maybe this will help. But to realize that we're not any better than the Hindus or the Buddhists or the Muslims or the Jews or whoever. That we're all the same. And we're all going towards the same hub of the wheel, as you will understand and think. You think of a wheel, there's a hub, that's God. And out on the outer rim, there are many spokes that lead to this hub. And each one of these spokes is a different path. And just because my path looks different than your path doesn't mean that we aren't going in the same direction, towards the center, which is God. Anyway, getting off the topic just a little bit. So chapters 5, 6, and 7 are the Beatitudes. Are the Sermon on the Mount. Chapter 5, verses 3 through 10 are the Beatitudes, these attitudes of being that we've been looking at. And the 4th Beatitude is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Hungering and thirsting, these are basic, that's our basic needs, is for food and water, as well as air, of course. Beyond air, there's air, of course. If we didn't have any air, we wouldn't be here. And if we don't eat and if we don't drink, hunger and thirsting for righteousness. Now that doesn't mean I'm right, you're wrong. That's where we miss the mark quite often. That's the word. Sin literally means to miss the mark. We've erred in our thinking and in or what we've done or say or do. That's where we make the mistake, is to think it's all about my being right and you're wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right. It's about the right use of our consciousness, hungering and thirsting for righteousness. So seeking unity, seeking an awareness of our oneness, seeking with God and with each other. It's not just my oneness with God, but our oneness with God, that there is not a spot where God is not. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. What did God create the heavens and the earth out of? There was nothing but God in the beginning, so it must have been all an expression of God. This is the spiritual awareness that has come to us through these words, and then we have people that have not been schooled in the spiritual sides of these words, and they have taken this off and separated us away from God, and created this alternative power called the devil or Satan or whatever that is, wow, we have really made a mess of things, haven't we? And that's what I'm trying to do, is bring us back into the center of God as our source and supply. Now in this session, we're looking at the Lord's Prayer. We already talked about our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. And the basic point is our Father. Our Father. It didn't say my Father, right? Or the the God of our fathers, which is the Old Testament version, the God of our fathers. It says our Father. That God is our Father. That it's our source and supply of all needed good of our lives and livelihood is God, our Father. And in the Aramaic, abun could be male, female, and it's really transgender, if you will. It's really not limited by gender. That God is not male or female, but male and female created He them for purposes of procreation, for the purposes of inhabiting the earth. Okay, but God is not male. God is not female. God does not have sexual organs, if you will, except the ones that are in us. That we are that expression of God in the male and the female. So we move on from there. Hallowed be thine, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Now the daily bread, the whole idea of daily bread, and we've been looking at Emmett Fox, the Sermon on the Mount, and we've been looking at Eric Butterworth, Discover the Power Within You, and Neil Douglas Klotz, The Prayers of the Cosmos. I've also been looking at Hindu and Buddhist scriptures and a lot of other materials from Christian writers, etc. To come to an understanding of this is not that bread is symbolic. That this is all symbolic. It's not just saying feed me, right? Give us this day our daily bread. We're not saying feed me, right? We're saying, and it's not just in the English, we've brought it down to give us this day our daily bread. And there's a word missing there that I think would clarify things a lot. It says, you give us this day our daily bread. That God is our source. That all we need and desire is readily provided. That was the lesson of the children of God wandering in the Israelites, wandering in the wilderness. And every day they could have as much manna, etc., as they could eat, but they couldn't store it for another day, or it would go bad. And each day they were supplied. Right? That's the basic lesson of this. Now we've messed it up. We've messed it up. Feudalism, capitalism, all these different isms where I got mine. I can only get mine by taking yours, right? There has to be lack in order for there to be abundance. That I have to take from you in order to get mine, and you can't have yours. This is insane, what we've done. And Jesus was telling us that is insane. Give us this day, you give us this day our daily bread. Sermon on the Mount, Emmett Fox. In order to obtain these things, we have to claim them, we have to recognize God, and God alone is the source and fountainhead of all our good. That it's there. The problem is we think in terms of our job, we think in terms of our spouse, we think in terms of our doctor, we think in terms of an agency, we think in terms of another person as being the source of our good. But these are just channels through which we experience our good. These are channels. These are not the source of our good. But when we recognize God as our source, all that we need and desire is readily provided, because then we open ourselves up to see other channels to receive, other than the one in which we've limited ourselves to. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our debts, or forgive us our trespasses, or forgive us our mistakes. Now again, we're not begging God, we're not pleading with God that this is, as Emmett Fox would say, an invocatory prayer, or an invocation of the awareness of God's. Eric Butterworth and other unity ministers call it an affirmative model of prayer, that we are affirming that our debts are forgiven. And when are they forgiven? It's pretty clear. As we have forgiven our debtors. as we have forgiven those who have trespassed against us, who have apparently wronged us. The fact is, we are never wronged by anyone else. No one can do anything to us that we don't accept. We have to accept the wrong for it to affect us. So forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So as we forgive others, as we let go of the limitations that we've placed upon ourselves by having unforgiveness, resentment, anger, those things, those negative emotions, they exist. They have a place, right? When something outrageous happens, a sense of anger wells up within us. That is healthy. But to hang on to it and not find a healthy way to express it. So something's happening, a child gets killed by a drunk driver, the woman gets angry and starts mothers against drunk driving. It was a healthy expression. What is that anger calling us to do? What changes in ourselves first, and then how might that express in our lives and affect others? But if we hang on to that anger, we get into resentment. They talk about resentment as drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, which is really stupid, but that's what we do. We're only hurting ourselves by hanging on to the anger, the resentment, hanging on to the pain. And so forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, we are forgiven. As we forgive others. What comes first? Forgiving others. That's what comes first. Even though it's, we're looking for forgiveness. Forgive us our debts. But he's telling us how to do it. First, you have to forgive. And this works in all situations. Forgive us our debts as our debtors we forgive. And do not bring us to a time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. That's the Revised Standard Version of the New Revised Standard Version. The Revised Standard Version, which I have here, says, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So it's a little different. Deliver us from evil. Lead us not into temptation. Deliver us from evil. Do not bring us to a time of trial, but rescue us from the evil one. This is another spot where I kind of differ. And I don't believe that God ever tempts us. We are tempted. There's no doubt about it. That's part of the human experience. We see these bright, shiny things, and we go, "Ooh, that's cool," right? "Ooh, I want that." "Ooh, I want that car. I want that house. I want that girlfriend. I want that bank account. I want that lifestyle. I want Bubba. I want. That's the temptation. And God doesn't tempt us, other than the fact that it's all God, and we're tempted by the bright, shiny parts of it, right? So leave us not. When I say the Lord's Prayer, I say, leave us not in temptation, because that recognizes that we're in temptation. There's lots of things that surround us. But when we become aware, when we wake up, when we become woke, that's a current expression now, right? Woke. When I'm woke, then I realize that these outer things have no value in and of themselves, other than the value with which that I give them. And that in a conscious awareness of God as my source and supply, I draw to me all that I need and desire, that nothing, I need for nothing. I need for nothing. And desire is of the Father, desire, of the Father. So all that the Father, and that's for an experience. Our desires are for experiences. So I draw to me all that I need and desire. I didn't say want. Right? I mean, I can have a lot of wants. In truth, want and desire are the same thing in the absolute sense, but in the relative sense, in this, so in heaven, in the spiritual sense, need and desire are the same thing. In the physical sense, they're two separate things. Want is for things, and desire is for experiences. To experience God's great good. Do not leave us in times of trial. Going back to forgive us our debts, this discover the power within you. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. This indicates the working of the great cosmic law, give and receive, cause and effect, forgive, and you are forgiven. And really that's the one law, is to give and receive. As we give, so shall we receive. Right? So as we give forgiveness, we receive forgiveness. As we open our consciousness up to the awareness of God as our one supply and source and supply, we receive through many different channels, right? And that as we find ourselves in temptation to believe that there is something other than God, something other than good, that's the beginning point for all evil. Look in John chapter 8, verse 48. That Satan is a lie, a liar, and a lie. The source of all lies. There is no truth in him. So the beginning point for all errors to believe that there's something other than God, other than good, that we call Satan, the tempter, the tester, the accuser, that the devil, the evil has no existence in and of itself. There is no critter called the devil, but it is a consciousness of separation from our good, of lack and limitation, that is the evil one. And that evil literally is to live backwards. Right? E-V-I-L, evil. L-I-V-E, live. So evil is live backwards. It's living from a belief that the outer is the source of our happiness, of our good, without recognizing that as within, so without. That when we live from an awareness of the presence of God, that all things work together for good. That is our potential and possibility. And then we have this final phrase, which is not put in the Revised Standard Version because it's not in the oldest texts, but was inserted somewhere around the 4th century A.D. And that is, and lead us, thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. So it kind of seems right to have an ending, that this is the ending, instead of leaving it, rescue us from the evil one, right? For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. And in Sermon on the Mount, Emmett Fark says, the kingdom in this sense means all creation on every plane, for that is the presence of God. God as manifestation or expression. Thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. That's the presence of God. It exists. It is. And it is eternal, unlimited, infinite. And that which is not eternal, infinite, unlimited is not real. And so this manifestation and expression, unless we see God in the manifestation or the expression, we do not see God. We do not. One of my teachers, Yogi Bhajan, I said that if you do not see God in all, you do not see God at all. If you do not see God in all, you do not see God at all. So in other words, if you see God in all, you see God. So God, if you don't see God in all, then you're not seeing God. God is the essence of all that is. So going on to the Hindu, from Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda came to the United States in 1893, spoke at the World Parliament of Religions, where Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity, spent some time with him and started distributing his pamphlets through their Unity magazine in the late 1800s. According to the yogis, there are 2 nerve centers in the spinal column, a hollow canal running through the spinal cord. At the lower end of the hollow canal is what the yogis call the lotus of Kundalini. Kundalini, that's the style of yoga that I like to teach and like to take, because it's very much about releasing that energy and allowing it to flow freely, that energy of God. When the Kundalini awakes, it rises step by step, layer after layer. The mind becomes open, and all the different visions and wonderful powers come to the yogi. So this is the rising of the Kundalini, and it's 2 channels that cross, and wherever they cross, wherever that energy crosses, that's the chakra points. And so we have this image of this ever-rising energy, visualizing that energy rising and lifting it up as we go from our root chakra to the plexus chakra, to the navel, to the heart, to the throat, to the mind, to the Christ chakra, and allowing that energy to rise. He says, when it reaches the brain, the yogi is perfectly detached from the body and mind. The soul finds itself free. The soul finds itself free from the limitations of body and mind. We are only limited by our own minds, our own thinking, and the limitations of the physical. But we're only limited when that's where we hang out. If we get out of the mind and the body, on occasion, daily, whenever, then we find ourselves unlimited. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, we talked about the middle path last time, and so now we're talking about what is that? That is these noble truths. So the noble truths of Buddhism, the noble truth concerning suffering, the noble truth concerning the origin of suffering, the noble truth concerning the destruction of suffering, the noble truth concerning the way which leads to the destruction of sorrow. Verily, it is this noble eightfold path. The eightfold path. So we have these four noble truths. This is from the sermon at Benares, which is posted. We posted on our website, peaceunity.net, along with this course series of attitudes of being. Right? The four noble truths. Number one, the truth concerning suffering. Number two, the origins of suffering, which is want. Right? It's that belief in our lack and limitation, that separation from our good. And then the noble truth concerning the destruction of suffering. The noble truth that we can lift ourselves out of suffering, that we can release the suffering. And then the noble truth concerning the way which leads to the destruction of sorrow, or leads out of the suffering. And it is this eightfold path, which is part of what we've been talking about in our series, right understanding, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. And so we've been working with those 8, as along with the 8 Beatitudes and the 8 limbs of Raja Yoga. And so we will continue this in our next session. We'll go back to the Beatitudes. We'll be looking at the 5th Beatitude, which is, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. So until then, God bless you and have a great day.